As you can see today, not today, this has actually happened this summer. I got my hands on a wet palette. And what a wet palette is, what this particular one is anyway, there's a bunch of different kinds, but this one has large wells, and it's basically a studio size. Not really meant to travel around, though it came with a really weird bucket. Really weird bucket. Anyway, not really meant to travel around. But it's huge, and I thought, if I got this thing and I put a lot of my inexpensive gouache in it, then it would make it a lot more accessible and easier to paint. And that, for the most part, has been true. So that's great. It has a huge membrane that fits over it, which keeps everything wet. And I've been painting with it in my studio for the last, since last summer. So this is me getting it ready. I'd already picked out which colors I'm going to use. And you can see it's a mix of the Royal Langnickel. There's some My Artscape, some of the Joann's, just because it's some weird, interesting colors that I really wanted to use. And I do mix some of them and put them in there. A lot of this video was me struggling with these tubes. Those Magic Fly tubes are super hard to get paint out of. So hard to get paint out of. And I really want to use up that Magic Fly and get it out of here. It's definitely not my favorite paint. But I thought you'd like to see me kind of filling it up, because it's kind of cathartic to watch the squeezing of the paint and, you know, getting it into the wells, because you need to do a little bit of preparation. So, of course, besides picking your colors, and you know, here I'm deciding which rose color I want to put in the red section, and also squeezing a little bit of the pink in there. But you need to add not too much liquid to gouache, because you don't want to make it necessarily ready to paint with quite yet. And there's a couple different reasons for that, because the maintenance for this palette, you're going to be adding a lot of liquid to it, and you don't want to overdo it and just water down your paints. And since I'm not using the greatest paints in this particular one, I have a smaller one. I put some Winsor Newtons and M. Graham in, which I think in my last video I was painting with. And that, you know, again, that was, you know, to kind of test these out. But you also need to add in some liquid. I would also suggest adding in some kind of preservative, which I'll talk about what that is too, as I'm doing this. And you're going to need to get it down in that well. So I'm kind of swatching a card here so I remember what the colors are and what they look like. And which turned out to be something I didn't really need to do. And I'll explain why. So what you've seen me do here of the last few colors is that after I get the color squeezed into the spot that I want it, kind of cleaned up the edges, I've kind of mixed it down. So I just took a palette knife and kind of mixed it down until it... And what this does is it evens out the paint in the well and lets you more evenly distribute and mix it when you're adding liquids later. Because you have to keep adding liquids in order to keep the paint wet. Now, of course, you know, you can let gouache dry, and a lot of this gouache will paint just fine dry, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was to keep it wet. That's why I got a wet palette, right? So after I've taken the palette knife and just kind of whipped it up a bit, that also gave me an idea of how thick it was and how much liquid I was going to need to add, because some of it came out really dry. You can see I'm really struggling with some of these blues. Oh my gosh, I started pulling out the tube squeezer, and it got so bad that I hurt my hands enough I had to like close it all up and paint with it later. But don't worry, there is a painting at the end of this, I promise. So some of it I had to like chop at and really like mix it in. It just took so much effort. But once I did that, that's when I added to each of these I added probably about 1 to 2 teaspoons of gunk. I've talked about my gunk a little bit more on the channel. It's just a mixture of gum arabic that I have boiled up myself, and tea tree oil, clove oil, some blending and flow additives that you would normally add for acrylic, but these are water soluble. They don't add plastics to it, so they're perfectly fine. A little bit of ox gall. It's when I was painting a lot of miniatures, that's something I learned to do, and I experimented with a few mixtures. I had a few friends who gave me some tips, and in the end, when I'm working with water media, especially wet media like acrylics and gouache and even the 2 watercolors, I'm going to be using my gunk mixture. It just, for me, it gets the paint to make consistently, as well as extending the life of the paint a bit more. And it gives you a lot more working time. And when you have this open, I'm able to leave this open and work with this palette probably, I do it for a few, like I've worked for it for like 4 hours at a time and haven't had to worry and just have to do the other part of the maintenance, which is spraying it down. If you get even with a little one, you're gonna want a little mist sprayer that you can spray down the palette. They make some kitschy tools for this kind of thing because of the whole Hemi pudding cup gouache stuff that become really popular. But any kind of little spray bottle, I just use the ones I use that I actually use when I'm painting, especially when I'm trying to do more wispy things and I need to wet the canvas. And just giving it a spray. I always spray it when I open it. I always spray it when I close it. I might spray it in the middle if it feels like it's getting tough. If the paint has really started to dry out, meaning if I stick my palette knife in there. So, you really got to go in and put some more in. So that's when I usually add some more gunk, as well as maybe a teaspoon of water or half teaspoon of water, and then really mix it really good. So that's pretty much me setting up that palette. And when I came back, I closed it up. Like I said, my hands hurt after all that. I came back and decided to do my first painting with it. So I did have, like I said, I was having those issues just figuring out how to deal with the paint that I got out of there, the state it was in, and getting it to the consistency I wanted to paint with. And so this is kind of a learning experience. And I had a kind of tough time with this painting because of it, but I've kind of really gotten to a place that with this palette where I'm comfortable about taking the paint and know what I have to do to get to the consistency I want. It's a lot of trial and error. You're gonna go. There's that. This is a little one. That one I have the Winsor Newton M gram and then the nicer paint. So, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna get painting and I just hope you enjoy.